Welcome. Today we're filming on Wajak Noongar Budja. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This week we're focusing less on the effects of trauma on other people, and instead we're going to have a look at how we, the people who work with or care for trauma survivors, can start to experience trauma based on their experiences. This is commonly called secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. Today I'll just use the term vicarious trauma. It happens when we get exposed to something traumatic that someone else has been through, and we start to feel those residual effects of the trauma, despite not being personally present during the traumatic event. Recently, there has been a lot more research done on vicarious trauma, so our understanding of it is now better than it ever was before. Now, what's really interesting about vicarious trauma is that the severity of the impacts, as well as the catalyst for experiencing it, are incredibly unpredictable. There's a few theories about why that is. If you think back a few weeks ago when we explored the concept of trauma, you'll remember that trauma isn't necessarily about an event. Rather, it's about the residual feelings, thoughts, and physical responses to that event. One way to understand vicarious trauma is through digging deeper into those residual thoughts that come from the initial event. To explore this, I'm going to use the example of a worker getting vicarious trauma from a client. So the worker hears about the traumatic event, and because we generally get into this industry because we care about people and want to help them, the worker thinks about and imagines that event. Now, this isn't a bad thing. It helps generate empathy and gives us an insight into why this person might be behaving in challenging or dysfunctional ways. However, if those thoughts start to become a fixation or become intrusive for the worker, we're beginning to edge toward the territory of vicarious trauma. When the worker starts to think about the client's experience when they're not at work, or when the worker starts to imagine something similar happening to their family or loved ones, and feels the intense emotions attached to that scenario, we'd want to start increasing self-care and mental wellness strategies. Without tackling this quickly, the worker can start to normalise that deep investment in the client's traumatic material, and then the worker begins to act in trauma-based ways, like becoming more emotionally unpredictable, having feelings of avoidance or increased anxiety, or feeling emotional flatness or numbness. One of the key things that Australian research has highlighted recently is that workers are more likely to experience vicarious trauma if they don't feel supported by the upper management. This generally leads to workers spending less time on their own self-care because their professional quality of life is decreasing. So what are the key takeaways for this? If you're caring for someone who has experienced trauma, make sure you prioritise your self-care and mental wellness strategies. If you notice you're starting to mentally take work home with you, then take action sooner rather than later. Talk to a professional and get some additional support. Vicarious trauma doesn't just go away on its own, but it can be easily managed with the right supports. Finally, if you're in management, make sure your actions, not just your words, are helping to infuse a culture of staff mental wellness. Normalise self-care as part of life. Recognise when your staff may be struggling and support them to seek help. Sadly, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you've learned something. If you have any questions, please email us on the link in this post and join us next time. Thank you so much.